Guy leaned up against the counter and pushed the little red button and dumped a whole tank of AFFF. It looked like shaving cream all over the place.
Yeah.
That was that. Those were the days. Those were some of the. That's a good incident to have. It was a near miss. It was environmental more than anything, but we didn't know it was environmental at the time. We just said, "Oh, it's just soap that went in the water." The elephant in the room, and the reason why probably a lot of people have clicked on this video is the thumbnail. You know, everybody recognizes the graphic. The Nikika was the closest facility to the Transocean Deepwater Horizon on April the 20th, 2010. Hey folks, welcome back to Getting 10-8. And this time, instead of having four of us all around, it's just going to be me and a guy that I have a lot of respect for. I met this man uh, working in the oil and gas industry, and he was my remote paramedic that worked with me on a couple of different facilities that we worked on. But there was a big, long stretch of life before I ever got to know him. I want y'all to welcome Michael Jones. Mike, welcome to Getting 10-8, brother.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
Well, now, look, here's the thing. When I met Mike, he lived in North Louisiana or Central Louisiana, but now you live over there on the left coast. I mean, the West Coast.
You were right the first time, but I live in a red area.
I got you. I got you. Well, I got to where I caught up with Mike. I talked to him a couple of years ago, and when he had just retired, and he said he was putting together a book, and I was like, man, that's cool. I mean, you've got lots of stories, that's for sure. And I didn't think anything else about it until I came across on Amazon. I came across uh, this book right here. Whoop, 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 whoop. There you go. Angels and Paramedics by Michael Jones. And it is available on Amazon. And if you want to read some of the stuff and he's got some graphics in here too, some pictures. It kind of talks about how he went through. And yes, he was a nationally registered emergency medical technician, and paramedic, but before he was ever that, you were Doc, Michael.
Yeah, I had a bunch of good Marines that I worked with that called me Doc, took good care of me, and I took good care of them.
All right, so let's touch on that because everybody's going to want to know. First of all, thank you so much for your service. You worked as a naval corpsman assigned to a Marine group.
Yes,
Um, how did that come to be? Were you drafted? Did you volunteer? Did you get to pick your MOS or what?
I originally was number 10 when they was drawing the draft numbers. And I figured, well, I'll just go ahead and enlist. And I went into the Navy. And of course, about 7 months after I went in, they had dropped the draft totally. In San Diego, I finished boot camp and A school, and then they loaded 35 of us up and took us over to Balboa Naval Hospital. And we all went through intensive Navy corpsman training. Uh, Five of us graduated.
Wow.
So
How many went in?
37, I think it was 37, and five
That's
graduated.
that's a pretty big washout rate.
It is, but they didn't pull no punches. It was 9 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 weeks. And then they sent me to Camp Pendleton, where I got assigned to a detachment of Charlie Company, 5th Marines. And from there, we went to Adak, Alaska. And in the wee hours of the morning, was loaded up on a C-141 and flown to Misawa, Japan, and then a direct flight Air America to Tan Son Nhut in the Republic of South Vietnam.
All right.
I spent
So
8.5 months there.
8.5 months in Vietnam. That's
Yes,
like 18 and a half years in Los Angeles, isn't it?
pretty close. Yes, in the battle zone.
So, um, did you see much action when you were there? I'm assuming you did, being assigned with Marines. And I
The
know there's
first
some stuff you probably cannot talk about, and I don't want you to say anything that'll get you in any trouble.
the first month or so, we saw very little activity. We were basically going to these forward fire bases and provided rear guard while they pulled the artillery and the personnel out. And then we had one man that would set off charges and make the place unusable. Then about halfway through my deployment, I lost one of my best friends over there,
Mm-mm.
uh, Bob Johnson. Him and Montagnard stepped on a bouncing Betty, and I held him in my arms while he died. That hurts.
Um,
8.5 months
abs-
of hell, though, brother.
absolutely. I can only imagine. You know, that's as medics, we watched a lot of people make their exits, and there wasn't anything that we could do. But it wasn't, for me, I had the benefit of these people really weren't known to me. They were a call to me.
Yeah.
And I was able to separate that. But I mean, these guys, you were embedded with them. You were part of the crew. And
Well,
from
they're family, and we took
exactly.
care of each other.
And from what I understand about from Nick, the fat electrician, he says if you want to go to war, mess with Doc. Don't screw with Doc, because every one of those troops are going to be on your ass if you mess with Doc.
I had a gunny sergeant over there, Gunny Sergeant Lambert, and he was a mess. Every morning we'd fall out and we'd be ready to go do PT and stuff. He'd go,
Right.
Doc, where the hell's my doc? Right here, Gunny. Doc, you got your stuff squared away? All squared away and ready to go. I don't believe you, Doc. Fall out and check your equipment. So one day I cornered him. I said, Gunny, why don't you want me doing PT with the guys? He said, Doc, look, your sole purpose in life is to take care of my boys. My boys' sole purpose in life is to take care of you.
That's
And
right.
so far, you're doing a good job, and so are they.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, he figured out I got to take care of my asset. You were an asset. Just like um you know, everywhere you've been an asset. When you were on a truck, you've been an asset. And I don't know um eh, and how I came to know you, I had left the trucks. I went to work offshore. I started offshore as an offshore paramedic. I went through the expanded scope of practice paramedic training so I could suture people. I could do ophthalmic exams, otoscopic exams. We were given antibiotics and stuff. We never had that crap on the ambulance.
We had a larger scope of practice.
Exactly. We were basically, we went out there and functioned more like PAs than we did paramedics.
Exactly. And we had good doctors that backed us up on it.
Right. Doc, we were Dr. Mom. That's what you wanted to be. You didn't
Yeah.
want to have to be a trauma paramedic. And, I came to know you from uh, a, a friend of ours that recently has, well, not recently, but he's gone on to his reward. He's passed away, Jimmy Parker. Uh, you filled in for him on a platform that I worked at, and that's how I came to know you. And he spoke
Yeah.
very highly of you.
I was doing fill in, and Jimmy and I, we were partners for a long time. And I helped him and worked with him to get through his paramedic, and he became an awesome paramedic.
Yes, he did.
And a lot of the guys I worked with that went on to get their paramedic, guys and gals, I am so very proud of them that they're still holding the torch up and still marching forward.
Not me, cuz I ain't holding nothing up. My back won't do too many of those Model 30 days. That two-man back breaking stretcher.
The Widowmakers, yes.
That's right. That's right. So, I gotta ask you, did you ever hear about the time Jimmy got pulled over on the way down to cruise change?
wearing his orange jumpsuit.
Jimmy,
Yeah,
Jimmy was 6 foot 12 and a half. No, he was about 6'5", I believe Jimmy was, and he weighed probably about 320. He was a mountain of a man.
big fella.
This dude crew changed using, it was a little Honda Civic that he crew changed out of, and he's on the way down trying to get to get to the heliport so he can fly out offshore, and he's in hell, I'll say it. He's in Plaquemine Parish, and he's on the way down to do a crew change, and he gets pulled over, and he's working on the Marlin facility. And one of the things that they did, they had jumpsuits that everybody wore, and it was safety orange in case you went overboard, you were going to be easy to spot. So he's dressed for work. He's driving down. It's the middle of the night. This cop pulls over. Now Jimmy, big old 6'5", 300+ pound guy, had that head shaved. He looked like he just got out of a mental institution. And this guy pulls him over. Now, Jimmy had law enforcement as well as part of his background. So he's going, okay, I'm pulled over by this cop. Let me get out and talk to him. So he opens the door and he starts unfolding out of this dang car as the officer's walking up to him. And when he sees Jimmy's big ass, he gets out, draws down on him, and says, "Easy, big boy." Jimmy, no, dude, no, I'm just heading for crew change. Oh, that had me in stitches the whole.
There
Oh,
was a lot more stories that Jimmy had that would have kept you in stitches.
yeah. Well, he uh he was a heck of a dude, and I hate that he's gone. I'm just blessed that I had a chance to get to know him and be a friend and call him a friend.
One thing about it, though, Rob, you got to admit that in all of the years that we worked EMS, there was a lot of people that crossed our paths that, I've always felt it was a pleasure that I got to know them. It's like you. We're a part of a brotherhood, a
Yep.
specialty group that we've been there, done that, and got many T-shirts for it.
Well, I mean, I learned stuff from you. I mean, you had tricks of the trade from being doc that you carried with you into being a medic, and it was a pleasure working with you. And you know, when I can't even remember. Oh yeah, I remember the name of the company. I'm not going to talk about the company that we made sure that the same company that was working on Marlin ended up going to this new facility that I was the original HSSE guy for that
Yeah.
facility, and that was the Nikika. And you came along, and we had a good ride there on that facility for a long time.
We did. It was awesome. My opposite number, Vic and I, and along with your help, we set up the sick bay, and it was our baby that we gave birth to, and we were ready for anything and everything, and it paid off in the end.
Well, my big thing about when we were building up that sick bay was, you know, when I first started as an offshore medic, they'd want to send us offshore, and they'd give us a couple of those little portable O2 bottles. I
Yeah,
said, dude, I said, no, out there offshore, I'm an hour from anybody at best. I need to have a main like we have in an ambulance. So
yeah,
that's the thing on every sick bay that I had a part in the design. I had it made sure that we had a main and had a backup to swap out. And we had the same O2 system that we had on an ambulance. You had your port just like you did on an ambulance.
exactly. And it was your idea that we use that cabinet to put them. What was it, M cylinders or G? I can't remember. In there, we
Yep.
had two of them, plus we had two on deck to back us up.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, when you worked offshore as a medic, as we said, you know, you aren't going to be a medic out there all the time. You're not going to be the trauma guy. You're mostly Dr. Mom.
Exactly.
So, so you end up with a sick bay. It's not like you've got a stretcher on an ambulance or a hospital stretcher. you've got a dang exam table. You had stirrups. You could have delivered a baby in there if you had to. Thank the Lord we didn't ever have to do that.
At least not on the floating platforms.
That's
I
right.
did one time on a derrick barge before I went to Marlin. I was on a derrick barge in the West Delta area, and 3 o'clock in the morning, we hear somebody hollering, and it's a drunk lawyer had his girlfriend, and she was in labor. So I
On the
got her in
fishing
my
boat.
sick bed. Yeah. So I got her in there and delivered the baby. The Coast Guard showed up, arrested him, and then took her and the baby to the hospital.
Oh Lord. Now I never heard that from you. You never told me that.
I, it just crossed my mind when you was talking about delivering babies. I've got 93 under my belt.
Yeah, I was in the 20s. I don't remember my exact number. I quit counting in the 20s. Um, but when I went offshore, I said, well, definitely I'm not going to have to deliver any more babies. And that was true for a while when I was offshore. But then you ended up getting more females in the oil and gas industry. Most,
Yes, a
but
lot of them.
didn't have any that were pregnant though. Well, one,
No,
we would have sent them home because a lot of the chemicals that we have out there, you look at the SDS is what they call them now. We called them MSDSs back then. Uh, there are a lot of chemicals out there that can harm the fetus. So if somebody was pregnant, they would have to take an office job for a while until they delivered that baby.
go to the beach.
That's right. That's right. Now, you know, I've kind of danced around and I've introduced you. What else do you have to say about the book that you wrote? I want to hear a little bit more about that. What was that process like, and are you happy with the way it turned out?
Yeah, it took me about 6.5 months to write it, and multiple reviews. My wife reviewed it and checked it for me and everything, and it's kind of an encapsulation. See, the first 20 years, when I moved back to Louisiana after the Navy, I was in West Central Louisiana, Sabine Parish,
Okay.
and they had one ambulance service, and it was run by a funeral home. And back then, they had a driver, and
What
it's
year is
somebody
this? What year is this?
77, 78.
Okay.
And they would throw people in the back of the ambulance on the stretcher and drive like crazy people to the local
Hmm.
hospital. And I asked the driver one time, I said, how do you treat them? Well, usually they make it. So, so the mayor of Florine, John Manasco, was my driving force in me going to EMT school. And right after I graduated, he started Florine Rescue and Ambulance Service, and he got his EMT also. Well, then within 6 months, I went and got my intermediate, and one of the local doctors there uh, had me come in and work with him one day for a 12-hour shift. And he had me go in and evaluate the patient, come back and give him a report. He'd go in and double check my exam. And the medical board for that particular hospital said that if the doctor orders it, Mike Jones can perform it, IVs, whatever, intubation, the whole 9 yards. Well, within a year of that, I went and got my paramedic. So it all paid off in the end. And like I said, 20 years working the streets in rural EMS where average response time was 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and then, so you did 20 years on the street before you
Yes,
came offshore.
yes.
And you talked about going and getting your registry. You had been doc. You were a combat medic. So how much of a transition was it for you going from what combat medicine is to civilian EMT on the street?
As far as anatomy and physiology goes, it wasn't a problem, but the
Right.
protocols and following the company's protocol and what the doctors wanted in combat, you have a large lateral area in which you do what you need to do. But in the civilian side of it, you gotta say,
It's
Doctor,
more
may I?
restrictive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more
But
restrictive.
I was able to adapt, and as the doctors got to know me, it was more like, you know, go ahead and do what you need to do, and then tell us why you've done it, and we'll give it our blessing. So
Yeah.
the the people benefited from it.
Right. Right. Immediately coming to mind when you said that, and I'm not going to ask you the question because I'm not going to ask the question. How's that?
Okay.
Um, I'll tell you off air what my question was. Just
Okay.
remind me. Just remind me. So I come to know you in like 2000,
2000, 2001. Yes.
about 25 years ago, and we stand up Nakika, and you were 50% of the medical staff that came on.
Yeah.
You and Vic, as you said, both came on, and we went out, and the elephant in the room, and the reason why probably a lot of people have clicked on this video is the thumbnail. You know, everybody recognizes the graphic. The Nakika was the closest facility to the Transocean Deepwater Horizon on April the 20th, 2010. And you wrote a chapter about this night in the
Yeah.
book. And you and I've got some, I understand that you were busy. I understand you were focused in on patients. And when I read it, it almost sounded like I was staying in the control room and just coming down and keeping you informed. That wasn't quite the case. As you recall, I said, hey, this sick bay is not big enough
Yeah.
for us to handle the patients. We got to get everything downstairs. So we brought everything down to the TV room.
Yeah. Dynamic was there to help.
Exactly. We had one guy that was an EMT basic for a fire department, volunteer fire department. You had me that was a paramedic that no longer was registered, and you were the registered paramedic. And I said, look, this is going to be a major incident. I'm gonna need to triage folks. So I was triaging. So yeah, I was bouncing around. I wasn't right there at your side the whole dang time. But what I was doing was because the Coast Guard was picking up patients with that basket. As soon as they got them out of the water, they were flying straight to us. We were the
Yeah.
closest big facility to them. So they were flying them straight to us. Dynamic and them were bringing them down to us to where we were treating. And I was triaging. All right, this guy needs to go in right now to go see Mike. This is going to be a critical. This guy's going to be yellow. Set him on the other side. Walking wounded, we put them upstairs. And God forbid if we had any blacks or any yellow primes, we'll stick those in the SCBA room.
Yeah.
And we'll grab one of the firefighters if it's a yellow prime to stay in there with us and chart a time if we have to. Thankfully, that didn't
We
occur.
had none.
But what I was doing, um, I was between the patients coming in. I would run up to the control room so I could let you know. I could get information from the control room, the ICS, the Incident Command System, get information from them, bring them down, keep you informed. Then I was getting information from you, bringing and keeping command informed. So I was working both ways, and I said, hey, if there's a helicopter coming in with a patient, forget it, I'm not here. And if there's a air ambulance coming in, I'm not here because I'm helping you get them transferred over and get them on there. So the biggest thing I
Yeah.
recall, and I've still got a picture of this where we had brought down the Stokes and the backboards, and we went so far as we were tearing tape, having everything where you could put your chevrets when you
Everything
started
was
lines.
ready.
When the
And
patients came in, we rolled.
and I got to say this, and in fact, two important points. One is I didn't know everything that you done that night, but I do know this. You were like that little voice in my left ear saying, this is what's coming. This is what we're going to have ready to go. This is where we're at. This is what's going on. You were my alter ego. And I knew that, and I keyed off of what you were telling me. And then as we were able to get people shipped out of there, all of the people on the platform that stepped up. I mean, I even told Houston and sent them a really nice letter about it because they was all, you done this, you done that. I said, no, it wasn't all me. I said, even the
it
catering
was,
crew,
yeah,
they were
it was.
going to the patients when I wasn't with them and staying with them and talking to them. So it took all of us, Rob, and we could have practiced this MCI for months and months and months and never got it as good and as accurate as what we were able to nail down that night.
Well, and I got to give a boost to all those people that, like you talked about, the catering staff,
Yeah.
dynamic, handling patients, getting them back and forth. These people hadn't worked with it. We told them, look, we need you, and by
Hmm.
God, they did. And
They
it
stepped
wasn't,
up.
and it wasn't uh, anything. We weren't. It wasn't like it was a 2-man tag team between me and you. It was the whole dang facility that made this
Exactly.
work. Because one of the things that you were also, that was a side gig for the medic, was what did you do during the day?
POB and handle helicopters.
HLO. You were the helicopter landing
Yep.
officer. You were a key asset, a critical asset that like that gunny told you, my job is to make sure you are protected, and your job is to make sure they're protected.
Yep.
Well, on the platform, you were my critical asset. You were our critical asset, and that night proved it. So when we pulled you down there, but then I think they learned a little something from that night because you were the HLO, and we've got helicopters coming. This is like an air traffic control going on up there.
It was 15 helicopters in the area that night.
And I'm not going to say a last name, but his first name was Joe. I
Yeah.
think he stepped up and filled in. He was your backup, your assistant HLO,
Yeah.
and
And
he went
Albert.
up there, and Albert, and that was a smooth transition
Hmm.
that worked out like a champ. Couldn't ask any better from those guys.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little secret. And I found out this later on what it was. They were there for about an hour and a half. The helicopters were coming so close together that as soon as they finished fueling one, Joe would roll a hose up. They would already have the handrail down and be clear of the main deck. Joe didn't have time to come down. He would just lay down in the fuel pit while that bird left and the other one came in.
They squatted in the fuel. All right, explain to everybody what the fuel pit is on a heliport.
Off to the side, you go down 4 steps and you have a hose and the controls and everything. And it's below the level of the helideck.
Yeah,
And you're responsible for running the pump, making sure that the ground's hooked up, a bunch of responsibility. So when he would get the hose back and the pump was off, the helicopter's already spooling up to leave. Joe would just lay down there by the hose below the level of the helideck. That way, if anything happened, it would be well above him and he would be out of harm's way.
right. Still not a protocol, and I'm not saying anything. I'm not in that situation anymore.
That's why I never said nothing to you till now.
Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing about that. That's only what, 15 years late?
Yeah, 15 years this coming Sunday, the 20th.
Yeah. Well, this is going to air that night, so this is actually going to air the anniversary of the event. Not because I'm trying to air it on the anniversary of the event, but because I got to have time to edit this thing, and that just happens to be where it's going to fall out.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a busy night for us, that's for sure.
what did you? I mean, what did you take away from that night? I kind of filled in a bunch of what I remember. What else can you fill in on the gaps on that night for us?
The biggest thing that was my takeaway was the willingness of people to step up and do things outside of their comfort zone and be supportive. And like that morning when the patients were gone and sick bay was back and restored, I had to go up and start doing the HLO duties because Joe had other things to do. You had a bunch of things to do, but people that slept through the night got up and how can I help? What can I do? And it was the culture that we had out there, Rob. We had an awesome bunch of people and people that had no medical background whatsoever. What can I do? How can I help you? And it was everything. Like I said, the catering people, would come to me and say, "Hey, this guy over here wants to know if he can have something to drink." And I do that mental check and go, "Yeah, he can have a little bit, but nothing, really strong." Or this guy can't eat. No, this guy. And then we had people that would just sit there and talk with them. And I got to tell this story. We had a planner scheduler, and she in my book she was awesome. And I was taking care of our worst patient, the guy with the 80% second and third degree burns. And
Yeah.
she was dealing with one of the guys that had a full flat scalp laceration all the way down to the galen. And he was concerned, and she got a family phone number and names, and she said, "I'll notify him." She said, "Am I going to be all right?" She says, "You happen to be very lucky. The best medic in the Gulf of Mexico is here to take care of you." And under my breath, I said, "Lord, please let me live up to those high standards, because this is a full plate we got going on tonight." Because originally we were going to get 126 people.
Well, we that was the possibility. That was the
Yeah,
POV of that facility,
yeah,
and thankfully there was a workboat. So if they weren't injured, they were putting the people that were not injured on the deck of that workboat, and they didn't overload us. Now, the Nakika was a facility that our POB max POB at that point in time was what 140 maybe
no, it was 98.
98.
98 was our POB.
Okay.
I
Um,
remember because I used to have to plug it in and tell them the
you
bad
had to
news
do the
before
math and
getting
go, oh
people out.
no, no, you can't come out here this day. Yeah.
No,
Um, and let's talk a little bit about on the HLO. Talked about Joe ducking into the fuel well. Let's talk about worst case scenario when a helicopter hits, if it hits the deck and explodes and catches fire. Do you remember what we had for the fire suppression?
yeah, we had a foam system all around the helideck that was awesome. Every time they tested it, I always went out there and watched it because it was instant snow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that snow was AFFF foam.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with the AFFF now?
absolutely.
The
In firefight
PFOS and
school.
PFO? Yeah. And I mean, when we went to fire training, I mean, we were hosing each other down with that stuff. We thought that was the
Yeah.
funniest thing in the world. No wonder my kid came out with a third arm. But no, it was yep, and it wasn't on the Nakika, but there was another facility, and I thought this was funny. This was for, I don't know if you remember this. We'd get all the incident reports where we could see every other facility, the incidents they had when they do an incident investigation. They would put it out, so it was information sharing, so we can learn from their mistake and vice versa.
Exactly.
And this one facility, to activate that, this one facility, you didn't have to have a fire team come up and scramble when a helicopter's coming, because in the control room, you got a control room operator. He's sitting there looking at a screen. There's cameras pointed at the helideck, and next to the screen that he's looking at, he's got a big red button that if that helicopter goes boom, he can just push the red button and activate the foam from the control room. And on this one facility, I'm not mentioning any names, somebody came in, was BSing with the guy that would be watching the helideck. There wasn't anything on the helideck, but the guy leaned up against the counter and pushed the little red button and dumped a whole tank of AFFF. It looked like shaving cream all over the place.
Yeah.
That was that. Those were the days. Those were some of the. That's a good incident to have. It was a near miss. It was environmental more than anything, but we didn't know it was environmental at the time. We just said, "Oh, it's just soap that went in the water." But
Yep. Exactly.
so all the years that you spent 20 years on the street. How many years in the oil and gas industry did you spend out there,
23.
Mike?
23.
23. So 43 years in EMS.
Yes.
Man, you deserve a hug or something. Somebody needs to give you a cuddle. Somebody needs to say, How did you get through that um, without emotional scars?
Uh, Back working the streets, I had got to the point, and I had two pediatric calls that just about done me in. The last one uh, was a car train accident, and in rural states like Mississippi and Louisiana, where you got a dirt road or one that's not hardly used, at a
Yep,
railroad
there's no,
crossing, they just have the little wooden crossbucks.
don't even have the lights.
Yeah, and we got called to the town of Anacoca. And as I pull up on scene, I see this guy in military uh, uniform, and I recognize him because at that time I was teaching the Army medics the EMT basic, and we had like a 91 to 93% pass rate at National Registry, those that went on to
Wow.
test.
That means you
Anyway,
were doing it right.
yeah. So he comes up to me and he said, "You have three patients. I got two 10-year-old boys. One of them's critical, and I got a 16-year-old driver. She's stable." I said, "What happened?" As we're going towards the boys, because you can see 2 miles each direction. He said, "I was right behind her in that minivan. She just got her license. The train was blowing its horn. She pulled up on the tracks and got nailed." So we get the two 10-year-olds, and just as I get them in the truck, our backup ambulance gets there for the 16-year-old. Well, we're heading into the hospital, which is about a 12-minute run. The young man on the bench quit breathing, so I intubated him. We get in the hospital, and I'm sitting at the nurse's station trying to put my report together, and they start coding this young man. The grandmother tries to come in, and a deputy stopped her, and she said, "No, you don't understand." And I'm going to use the name Bobby. Uh, Bobby told me yesterday that last year his daddy went to be with Jesus, and that tomorrow he was going to go be with his daddy. And the young man passed. And they, uh, within a week or two, closed that crossing, and there was a memorial set up out there. But that just about done me in working the streets. Rob, you know yourself, you have Teflon coating when you first hit the street, and
Until
after
it's
a while,
kids.
it starts wearing thin, especially with kids.
And it,
So I went to
absolutely.
the Gulf of Mexico where all my kids that I took care of were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Mm. But then, but then you're taking care of your cousin, your brother, your
Yeah,
uncle, and that crazy bastard that lives down the street. You know,
yeah,
it's but it's the crazy bastard that you see on a regular basis. You know.
exactly. You know all these people. Or
Oh,
if you don't
and
know them personally, you know their cousin.
well, and here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. When you work out there offshore, you talk about they're like a family. They were truly like a family because when you went home, you had two less days at the house
Hmm.
because traveling to and from for crew change. Two
Yeah,
less days at the house than you did when you were offshore. And when you were offshore, you were with these sons of guns for 24 hours. Uh,
exactly.
my ex wife would go to work, so I didn't see her for the day. I'd be out fishing. My kids were at school. You know, so I was really a part time dad and a part time husband.
Yeah. But like you said, we get really close to these guys that we work with, and uh, I wouldn't trade it for all of the money in the world because both on Nakika and then when I went to Atlantis, it was the same thing. A lot of the guys from Nakika migrated to the Atlantis.
Right,
OIMs, everybody.
right. Well, I'm going to tell you that, I'm going to bounce back to the eventful night. Uh, no last name, but Durf was the OIM
Yeah.
that was there. And when, I came back because, and I told this story last episode, but I'm going to reiterate it so you'll hear this part of my story. Was when I was in my office, sitting there at the computer, and in comes the subsea supervisor, who was a Shell employee, and he tells me, he says, "Rob, the horizon to the north of us is on fire. They're abandoning ship. Come down to the control room." So I throw on my steel toes, my hard hat, and I go down to the control room. And I said, I've got to see this. So I'm going out. I had to go down to the first floor because leadership floor was second floor, and that's the same floor with the control room. So I go down to the first floor, and I exited from the SCBA room, that SCBA room door. And when I opened that door, I looked out, and this is late at night. It's black. Normally, when you're offshore, no light pollution. You know, the
None.
horizon was what, 11 miles to our north?
11 or 14. I can't remember the exact. Somebody had once said it was 16, but it was close.
All right, in a helicopter, that's that quick.
Yeah.
But and when you're on the horizon and there's nothing there, and that facility's sitting up, it's elevated just like we were elevated. It looks
Yeah.
like they're right next to you. And when I say I opened that door and there was a funky orange glow in the air, it was. Now, it was blacked out right in the middle because I was coming out of the living quarters. And as I explained last week, tidbit of trivia on production platforms offshore, production's always on the north side, south side's always the living quarters. All the living quarters are coated with this real thick, fire resistant, explosion resistant coating that gives us, it's supposed to give us a 12-hour window to be able to have a safe haven in our living quarters. When I rounded and I saw the facility, I walked up and I was down under our flare boom. And when I looked out there, I was just staring dumbfounded at it. And I said, finally, something snapped in my head. Said, they're bringing them to you, Rob. And I was like, holy shit. And that's when I came across the platform and went to get you. Me and the Marine supervisor came up to tell you, come on, we got to load up all this stuff and get it down to the TV room. And that's what kicked us off that night.
Yeah.
And
And
when I
like I said, everything fell into place. We couldn't have planned it any better.
well, and then one of the times where I was between patients when I triage said this one goes yellow, this one goes straight to my, one of those times I'd gone up to the control room. Like I said, I was up there and I was communicating to you and I was communicating to ICS. I was the go between. And before any of that took place, Durf said, "What do we need to do?" And I said, "We need to get on the horn and get every IV fluid that this other facility has that's close to us. One of these helicopters needs to swing by and get it because I don't know what we're going to need." And those other facilities, logistically, they got us everything we needed to get
Yeah.
through that night.
And little side note here, especially for the other paramedics, at 1:30 in the morning, trying to remember the Parkland formula for hydration of a burn victim,
Oh yeah, yeah,
especially when you haven't used that in 20 plus years.
right, right. Um, but in your book, uh, again, Angels and Paramedics by Michael Jones, you give that formula just to
Yes,
reiterate to the paramedics. This is a formula you need.
absolutely.
And well, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on. Is
I have
is there
enjoyed it.
anything?
This brings back a lot of memories, brother. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, and we're doing this kind of short because some of the memories, that night, like I said, this was the elephant in the room that we had to talk about. But
Yeah.
you know, the next time I have you on, I want to be talking about some of the lighter side of stuff. This was a pretty heavy show. Uh, I apologize to everybody that's watching this, but I kind of figured if you wanted to get the first responders' perspective of what happens when there is a mass casualty offshore, this man that I have on right above me is the guy that's going to be able to tell you what happened, did, and good and bad of it.
Well, both of us can attest to what went on that night. It
You
took
know,
it took all of us, Rob.
yeah,
And I'm just glad I had you as my little voice in my left ear, keeping me attuned to everything.
yeah. I hope I was the angel on the shoulder, not the devil on this one.
Yeah, you were the angel on the shoulder. I promise you that, brother.
Well, Look, folks, I appreciate y'all coming along with us, and I'm glad y'all got to meet Michael Jones. Again, our email, I'm going to put it right here. Our email, if you want to email the show, is gettin108@gmail.com. If you have ideas for the show or ideas of guests that might be good on the show, please send them to us at gettin108@gmail.com, and we will do our best to see if we can fit that into the schedule. Again, I appreciate y'all coming, and look forward to seeing y'all again next week. I plan on trying to put one of these things out every week. And Mike, you got to tell me you're going to come back in the future.
Yes, just holler at me and I will come back and visit with you anytime.
Well, always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure, and it's good seeing you. Oh, wait, another elephant in the room we got to talk about. Um, when you were offshore, you were clean shaven, but for a mustache, and the mustache you wore, you kept it just like military, not passing the corner of your mouth and all
Yeah.
that. Let's talk about this.
Oh, oh, oh.
There he is.
Every December.
Every December, you volunteer as Santa Claus for.
For the sheriff's department, we spend 2 days. We hit 18 hospitals over 2 days. And
That's
one of them,
awesome.
Eisenhower at Palm Springs, the CHP estimated it with the patients and the staff that were outside when we go through in the sleigh, about 3,300.
Wow, that's
And
unreal.
then we do East Vale, Candy Cane Lane, which they ride us around and we make 6 different stops and we see the kids and we go to special needs kids. And the 8th to the 20th or 23rd of every December is strictly Mr. and Mrs. Claus.
And you are booked up.
I am booked up. Yeah, I get
Mr.
booked up
Mr.
before
Claus
October.
is pretty popular.
Yes, very popular.
All right, folks. Again, if you go to Amazon, you can pick up Michael's book. Michael Jones wrote Angels and Paramedics. Angels and Paramedics. You can find it at Amazon.com. Anything else you want to talk about this, sir?
No, just if you wanted some interesting reading and see some insight on what it's like to work the streets, and if you're a paramedic and you're precepting somebody, what I've always tried to do is say, share your knowledge with them and tell them that what they're doing, you want them to be to the standard if you were taking care of one of their own loved ones.
Right.
Good
Or
quality
me.
care. Or me.
That's right. That's right. Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on. Folks, y'all come back and see us next week. We'll be back here again at Getting 10-8. But now it's time to get 10-10.